access to changes through private previews and learning about our product roadmaps, you can join our private preview community. This is located under the Private Community Customer Connection Program section. We believe that the best way to improve our products is by removing any barriers between you and the people that create them. So, we hope you'll join us.
And now into the topic. In today's session, future Kortor and Tom Janetscheck will be providing a comprehensive overview on the upgrade to Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. And without further ado, I'll pass the mic over to them. Tom, future, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Valen, and I'll just start sharing my screen here in a second. All right, welcome to today's webinar, everybody. As Valen mentioned, today we're going to be talking about the Unified Vulnerability Assessment Scanning powered by Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management for your servers and container images. For today's agenda, first we'll talk about the Unified Vulnerability Assessment Scanning and some of the benefits that come with that. Then we'll take a closer look into how you can use Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management for your container images and for your servers. And lastly, we'll end today's presentation with Q&A. Now, you're probably already familiar with Microsoft Defender for Cloud. For those who are not, Defender for Cloud is a cloud-native application protection platform which is designed to protect your cloud-based applications from code to cloud. And this includes both cloud security posture management and cloud workload protection capabilities, as well as extending to multi-cloud workloads. So that includes Azure, AWS, GCP as well, and on-premises workloads. So a key part of cloud security is being able to continuously monitor and manage vulnerabilities across your cloud workloads. And vulnerability management is really important because it helps organizations improve their security posture, reduce the attack surface, and also help them prevent security breaches. And if we look at some recent statistics here, you'll see that your attack surface has already grown 3x in recent years and will continue to grow. In fact, in 2022, there were over 25,000 CVEs that were published. And in today's complex landscape, you need the right tools to keep your organization secure. As we see here, vulnerabilities are outpacing a lot of traditional solutions, and a lot of times these solutions are using periodic scanning, which is leaving gaps between the scans and making it difficult to keep up with a rapidly changing landscape. And this is where Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management comes in. And within Defender for Cloud, for our cloud workload protection plans for containers and servers, as well as the cloud security posture management, we are using a vulnerability scanning powered by Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management to help our customers reduce their cybersecurity risk by continuously monitoring and discovering new vulnerabilities in their cloud landscape. And when we think about the benefits of using this in-house scanner, there are a couple of different benefits here that come to mind. So the first one is that by using Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management across the different workloads, we provide consistency. So this is creating a unified experience that ensures that you have comparable results across the different cloud platforms that you have onboarded to Defender for Cloud, and really simplifying the security tools and configurations that are needed to use the vulnerability scanning. The next two here are efficiency and reduced cost. So with efficiency, it's saving you time and resources by avoiding duplicating efforts and really streamlining the assessment process. And also reducing costs because it's eliminating the need to have to purchase multiple different scanning solutions for the different types of cloud resources or cloud service providers. By using Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, we're also helping organizations to comply with different cybersecurity standards that are relevant for their industry and their region. And lastly, with the help of the Defender Cloud Security Posture Management Plan, we're also able to provide a contextual risk analysis and show customers which vulnerabilities they need to prioritize that pose the greatest risk to their cloud environment. So with those benefits in mind, we'll take a closer look at how you can use Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management for container security and how you can use it for server security. So starting off with container security. With container security, we offer agentless vulnerability scanning powered by Microsoft Defender for Cloud across all cloud platforms. So this includes container images that are stored in Azure, as well as Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud platforms. And one of the key benefits here is that it's agentless and there's zero configuration required. So you simply have to enable the Defender for Containers or the Defender Cloud Security Posture Management Plan to get access to the vulnerability scanning. And we're also able to provide scanning for images that are stored in the registry, as well as images that are running on your Azure Kubernetes service clusters, your Elastic Kubernetes service clusters, and your Google Kubernetes engines as well. The second thing that you'll notice here is the continuous monitoring. So we're able to scan new images after push and also rescan images that are running every 24 hours on the cluster. So this is providing an increased time interval here for the vulnerability results and also showing you a more accurate view of the latest vulnerabilities in your containerized environments. The next thing you'll notice here is that we're protecting your images across registry and runtime. So as I mentioned, you have the option to use MDVM for both container images and container images that are stored in the registry and container images that are running on the cluster. You'll also notice that we provide support for both OS and programming language packages. And lastly, we're able to show exploitability insights. So show you if the CVE is in an exploit kit, if that's been verified, and if there's any exploit steps that have been published for the CVE. Now, taking a closer look here in terms of what the newest updates that we're offering with MDVM. So the first thing you'll see here is the agentless vulnerability scanning for images in the registry. And previously, we only offered this capability for ACR, but with MDVM, we're able to provide a unified experience for also ECR, GCR, and GAR as well. The next thing you'll notice here is runtime vulnerability scanning. Previously, we were only able to support Azure Kubernetes services, but now we're also able to support Elastic Kubernetes services, Google Kubernetes engines, in addition to AKS. And then next, you'll notice the one-click onboarding with zero configuration. And this was previously available for Azure only. With MDVM, we're extending this to multi-cloud as well. And next thing you'll see here is that previously we were scanning new images near real-time for Azure. We're still doing that for Azure with MDVM, but also extending the scanning to scan new images within a few hours for AWS and GCP. All right. Some additional benefits that you'll see here is the rescan frequency. So with our previous offering, we were only able to rescan every 7 days, but we've improved that with MDVM to scan daily, which again is providing you a more accurate view of the vulnerabilities in your environment. You'll also see here that we extended the scanning criteria. So previously we scanned on push, pulled images in the last 30 days, and images that were running indefinitely. So we continue to support those 3 triggers in addition to scanning images that were pushed in the last 90 days, which is covering a wider time span here and allowing you to detect any CVEs for images that may become active. For supported OS packages, you'll see that we've extended our offering here with MDVM in supporting more OS packages, and we continue to support the same language packages as before. And then lastly here, we did add some new capabilities that are specific to MDVM. So the first one being looking at the real-world exploitability insights, which is being able to surface exploitability information for CVEs, leveraging exploit sources such as CISA-KEV, Exploit DV, and the Microsoft Security Response Center. We're also providing software vulnerability evidence for OS packages, which come with a command that can be used to find the vulnerable package on the image. And lastly, you'll see here that we continue to support private links in ACR with Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. So taking a look here at some things to consider for migrating. So you'll see that in August, we announced general availability for MDVM for containers in Azure with the Defender Cloud Security Posture Management offering. And we also went public preview with Defender for containers. In November, we announced the deprecation of the Qualys vulnerability assessment scanning, and we also went GA with the MDVM scanning in Defender for containers for Azure. And previously, we announced retirement of Qualys container image scanning and shared that Qualys will be retired March 1st of 2024, meaning that Qualys container image scanning would no longer be available in Defender for containers. So all new customers that are onboarding would automatically benefit from Defender vulnerability management scanning. And if you're still using the results from the Qualys scanning, you have until March 1st to migrate. And we do have some migration steps to share with you all today. So the first thing that you'd want to do is enable the scanning, which I will show you how that can be done through the UI. It's also enabled by default when you turn on the Defender for Containers plan with policy and REST API as well. If you're still getting the Qualys recommendations, you do have the option to disable that. And if you're using any REST API or Azure Resource Graph queries, you would need to update that to reflect the latest MDVM recommendations. And we do have a reporting, a container security workbook that shows you the results for both scanners and also allows you to see additional examples of Azure Resource Graph queries. And I've included a link to our public documentation here that shows you how you can transition to MDVM using these 4 different steps. So taking a closer look here at what this includes. So first off, you want to enable the vulnerability scanning for containers. And all that requires here is the agentless container vulnerability assessment toggle to be turned on. And this will start scanning your images that are stored in ACR. If you're interested in the runtime scanning as well, it would require you to also turn on either the agentless discovery for Kubernetes or the Defender agent. So the next thing after you've turned it on, or you've made sure it's turned on, if you're still viewing the results from Qualys, you can go ahead and disable those recommendations. So what you'll have to do here is search for the Qualys recommendations, which will show as deprecated, and you can click the exempt here, and it will open up the toggle, which is on the right side of the screen. And then from there, you want to select the scope that you'd like to exempt, and fill out the additional details here and create the exemption rule. So this would cause this recommendation to no longer show up for you in the Defender for Cloud portal. And lastly, you want to update REST API and reporting. So as I mentioned before, we do have an out-of-the-box container security workbook that covers both Qualys and MDVM. So just showing you quickly what this looks like. Once you navigate to the workbook, you'll see at the top that we have results for ACR at both the registry level and the runtime. And in both results, you'll see in both tabs, you'll see the results for the vulnerability scanning. So with MDVM, you get an overview of the exploitable CVEs in your environment, as well as the fixed status, if any exploit steps have been published, if they're verified or in an exploit kit. You can also drill down to the registry level here and view the vulnerable images by registry and repository, and continue to drill down from there. In addition to that, you'll see the results for Qualys right next to that, which also shows you an overview and allows you the capability to drill down from to the registry repository, and then view the vulnerable image. So going back here. So those are some things to keep in mind when transitioning to Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management for containers. So taking a look at some common questions that we received, which is also outlined in our documentation, and feel free to share any additional questions if you have any. So one question that we receive is there any change to pricing when you transition to Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management? And the answer to that is no. The cost of the scanning is included in both Defender for Containers, Defender CSPM, and Defender for Container Registries, which is deprecated, and it does not differ in regard to the scanner being used. The second question is, am I being billed twice when scanning with both offerings? And the answer to that is no, that each unique image is billed once according to the pricing of the plan, regardless of what scanner is being used. And the third question here, does scanning with Defender Vulnerability Management require an agent? And the answer to that is that the container image scanning for the registry is completely agentless. If you choose to also leverage the runtime scanning, you have the option of using both an agentless and agent-based deployment, which will allow maximum visibility when the vulnerability scanning is enabled. And they both leverage the improved refresh rate for the image inventory on the clusters. So with that in mind, I'll go ahead and pass it over to my colleague, Tom, to share more about the MDVM for server security.
Thank you very much, Future. Just a second, trying to take over the presentation. And here we go. So when we're talking about vulnerability scanning powered by MDVM within the server space, then it is a little bit different from what we have heard so far within the scope of containers. In Defender for Servers, we are using a hybrid approach here. So first of all, you can use an agentless approach of getting MDVM deployed, which includes zero configuration, similar to what we heard about the container estate, and which also doesn't have any impact on any cloud VM. And this is a capability that is available across Azure, across Amazon Web Services and Google Cloud Platform. But we are focusing on a hybrid approach, which means that you can use agentless scanning for your multi-cloud VMs, but you can also leverage an agent-based capability. And as a consolidated, unified agent within the scope of Defender for Servers security, we are focusing on Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So Defender for Endpoint is the agent that allows us to scan the operating system for vulnerabilities and to provide the insights in Defender for Cloud. One of the main benefits is the software inventory that is provided by MDVM, which we did not have with the Qualys capability. Software inventory means that Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management will scan your operating system for applications and bring that into context with some known vulnerabilities for these applications. And that way, we do not only show the actual vulnerability and the CVE ID, we can also show all the software that is installed on a particular individual machine. How that looks like in Defender for Cloud is this screenshot that I took here. So what we see is that this is the security recommendation. Machines should have vulnerability findings resolved. We see the list of all the findings. When we click a finding, we see the list of all the included CVE IDs. We have more information such as which is the solution that created this actual finding. This can be Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, or it can be agentless Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. So with the solution information, you always know if it was the agent-based or the agentless capability that created this particular vulnerability finding. In addition to that, something we just released a few weeks back is the software vulnerability evidence. That is a new capability that not only shows that you have a machine that is vulnerable for a particular vulnerability, but if you click the machine itself to get further information, that is the machine we have seen before, and we click this individual finding, we get the evidence path. So we know what is the actual file or registry key that created this vulnerability assessment finding. So there is quite a lot of benefits of using Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management within the scope of Defender for Cloud. Going one step back, there's still an additional capability which is called MDVM Premium. And MDVM Premium capabilities are included in the Microsoft Defender for Servers Plan 2. These include certificate assessments, OS security baseline assessments, and way more capabilities in here. So if you enable Defender for Servers Plan 2, you automatically have access to the agentless scanning, you have access to the agent-based scanning, and you have access to all the MDVM Premium capabilities that I mentioned. Talking about migration guidelines. So when we take a look at the migration roadmap, then we started similar to the containers environment in November with the deprecation announcement of the Qualys VA as part of Defender for Servers. Early January, we stopped the built-in Qualys vulnerability assessment solution to be available for new customers. New customers within that scope means a customer that has not yet been using Qualys vulnerability assessment on their subscription. That can also mean an existing customer, so someone who has been using Qualys vulnerability assessment so far and creates a new subscription. That new subscription can no longer use Qualys as the vulnerability assessment solution. Going forward, in May, we will deprecate the solution overall, which means that as of then, the built-in Qualys vulnerability assessment will also no longer be available for existing customers for their new machines. So it's not only a subscription, also if you have a subscription that is covered by Qualys as of May, if you create a new virtual machine, it will not benefit from the Qualys vulnerability assessment anymore. Between May and November, existing Qualys agent will still report their findings. So that means that a machine that still has the Qualys vulnerability assessment extension deployed can be scanned by the Qualys solution and will report the findings to Defender for Cloud, but only until November, when we will also stop the integration with the existing machines. At the same time, in May, we will start to actively migrate all remaining built-in Qualys customers. That means that as of May, when the deprecation is due, and you can no longer deploy the Qualys vulnerability assessment solution to any new or additional machines or subscriptions, we will start to migrate existing subscriptions to use Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. You have a chance to opt out of that auto migration, and that is if you are using one of the two bring your own license vulnerability assessment solutions. We do offer an integration with bring your own license Qualys or bring your own license Rapid7. And if you have deployed one of these solutions anywhere in your tenant, we will not migrate your tenant to the new MDVM solution. So then you will have to either remain on the bring your own license capability, which is, by the way, only available for Azure VMs, but not for multi-cloud or on-prem servers. Or you can decide to manually migrate to MDVM according to your choice. The aspect number 4 is quite interesting because in order to get Microsoft Defender vulnerability results, you either need to deploy agentless scanning in your subscription or in your multi-cloud account, or you need to have Microsoft Defender for Endpoint deployed. So without Defender for Endpoint as an agent, you cannot use the agent-based capability of Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. And also in the future, just for the sake of completeness, we are not deprecating the bring your own license Qualys and Rapid7 offerings. So you can still continue to use both of them for your Azure virtual machines. When we talk about, or when we take a closer look at FAQ, then interesting enough, there are some questions on these slides that have already been answered in the chat. So that is a good indication that the FAQs really are FAQs. So let's take a closer look at these. First thing, and this is something that is coming from most of the customers that we've been talking to, is what are the options that I have when I want to migrate not only one subscription, but my whole estate from Qualys to MDVM? Well, you have two options here. You can either use a new built-in Azure policy, or you can use a REST API call against your estate. The new Azure policy that we developed is called Setup Subscriptions to Transition to an Alternative Vulnerability Assessment Solution. This policy can be assigned to a subscription or to your management group, and it will basically talk to the same REST API provider we are going to talk about in the next slide to set the Azure server setting for, which basically is the vulnerability assessment provider setting, to Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. You can use the same REST API or the same endpoint to also use a REST API call. You don't have to rely on an Azure policy. And the REST API call will look similar to this one. What we have here is, first of all, the REST API provider is Microsoft Security. And the server vulnerability assessments settings operation group is the one that we are talking to with the API version that you can see here. What you will do is you will submit a put request against this URL, including your subscription ID. This is just a placeholder here. And it needs to include the request body that you see here. So it is the Azure servers setting with the property of the selected provider, and the provider setting is MDE TVM. That is the legacy name of Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, but it is still included for automation purposes. And the policy that I've talked about in the slide before will do exactly the same. So it will talk to this API provider, and it will submit the request body to set this setting on every subscription within the scope of the policy. Which Defender for Servers plan is required for MDVM scanning? We do have two plans, Defender for Servers Plan 1 and Defender for Servers Plan 2. The core Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management capability, which includes vulnerability assessment and software inventory based on MDE as an agent, is included in both Defender for Servers plans. The add-on capabilities, which includes the operating system security baselines, the certificate management, the capability to block vulnerable apps, and so on, is included in Plan 2 only, and the same goes with agentless scanning. So the agentless scanning, when we're looking at Defender for Servers plans, is only included in Plan 2. Now, what do I do if I would like to upgrade to MDVM, but I'm using a third-party EDR solution? That also was a question that we had in the chat earlier. So for cloud resources, we recommend to enable agentless scanning, because that way you can still benefit from the whole coverage. By the way, agentless scanning in the meantime is a platform, no longer just a vulnerability assessment solution. So agentless scanning provides vulnerability assessment results, but also secret findings. And it will also provide you with malware scan results as part of Defender for Servers Plan 2. And the interesting aspect is it doesn't have any impact on your machine's performance, because it is a platform-based snapshot that we are creating in order to scan the disk for everything that I mentioned before. Now, if you're not using a cloud resource, but it is an on-prem server, then unfortunately you cannot use agentless scanning, because we don't have the agentless capability for on-prem servers. We actually would have to get access to your data center to create a snapshot and so on, and that is not feasible. So this is why you don't have agentless scanning there. So in this situation, you would have to deploy Microsoft Defender for Endpoint as an agent, and then you can leverage Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management as your vulnerability assessment solution. What else do I need to consider after migrating to MDVM? That is also a question we get quite often. And the answer is you need to remove the Qualys vulnerability assessment solution from your machines. That is something we cannot do for you for now, but it actually is a quite easy task to do. When we take a technical look at what happens when we deploy Qualys to a machine, then this is a virtual machine extension. The benefit of the Qualys VA extension is that once you remove the extension from the machine, like from outside the machine, you don't have to go into the operating system, then removing the extension will automatically uninstall Qualys from that individual machine. And knowing that, it makes it quite easy, because that way you can now just touch the machine from outside with either PowerShell or with a REST API delete request. The extension has two different names depending on the operating system. It's either called Windows Agent.Azure Security Center or Linux Agent.Azure Security Center. And when we look at PowerShell, then we have two different commandlets depending on if this is an Azure VM or if this is an Azure Arc enabled server. For an Azure VM, you will use remove AZ VM extension. For Arc, you're going to remove AZ connected machine extension. The command itself is pretty similar, so you will just add additional information such as the extension name and the virtual machine name or the Azure Arc machine name, and then once that extension is removed, the Qualys agent is going to be uninstalled from the operating system. Or you go the REST API route, which allows you to delete that extension as well. For REST API, it looks a little bit more complex, but in the end, it's exactly what PowerShell will do, because under the hood, PowerShell will basically talk to the REST API provider. And the REST API provider in this case is Microsoft.compute/virtual-machines/extensions. And the delete request would go against this URL, which is management Azure.com subscription, including your ID, then your resource group, the provider name, which in this case is Microsoft Compute, your VM name, and the extension name, which could be, as we said before, Windows Agent or Linux Agent.Azure Security Center, followed by the API version. And if you submit that delete request, it will delete this extension from this individual machine that you enter here. For Azure Arc, it looks exactly the same. There's just one difference, which is that it's Microsoft Hybrid Compute Machines extensions instead of Compute Virtual Machines extensions. And what we see here down here is, it's basically the same REST API call. Instead of the VM name, you have the machine name, and the provider is a different one. But you get the point. It's pretty similar from a deployment or delete perspective. Now, how can I monitor machines that are still covered by Qualys? We have published a workbook which you can download at aka.ms/CVE dashboard. This is a workbook that actually was created to give you insights into CVE findings based on either Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management or based on Qualys. But in the meantime, you can also use it to find out if you have a machine that is still using the Qualys extension, because if you select the Qualys toggle in that workbook, it will show you all the virtual machines that still have the extension and that still have open findings. So there's a quite easy way for you to find out without having to go to each individual machine or each individual subscription. You just use that workbook, deploy it to your environment, select all subscriptions, look for Qualys, and you will see which machines are still giving you results based on the Qualys solution. And with that, we're at the end for the servers part, and we would like to open it up for questions.
Thank you, Tom and Future. This is great information indeed. Before we dive into the questions, I just noticed that there were some questions related to the roadmaps and all that, and I just wanted to inform folks that for deeper conversations and how they can influence our product designs, as well as getting early access to changes such as private previews and learning about our product roadmaps, please join our private preview community. The link has already been shared at aka.ms/join private community CCP. So there were, although you tackled some of the cost associated questions and answers to that, there seems to be a theme of questions around the costs associated to the actual upgrade from Qualys to MDVDM. So if you can cover that, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. So in general, there is no additional cost associated with the upgrade. What, like from a billing perspective, what we do is, if you enable Defender for Servers as a plan on your subscription, you will be charged for every machine within the scope of that Azure subscription. And now you used to have the decision to either use Qualys VA or Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management as your vulnerability assessment provider within that scope. With the migration, we are not changing anything in the billing model of Defender for Servers. So we will still charge every machine within the scope of that subscription, and the only cost that is associated is the effort that you need to put into the migration. As we highlighted, the steps would be to enable MDVM as the leading vulnerability assessment provider on your subscription, and then to remove the Qualys vulnerability assessment extension from your machines. That is something where you could see some associated cost, because that is internal cost of effort. But it's not a license increase or a cost increase within the scope of Defender for Servers billing. We're basically just changing the provider, the solution that we are giving you to get the insights into vulnerabilities on your machine.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, go ahead, Future, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that from the container side, there's no change in cost as well. So it's all included with the Defender CSPM or Defender for Containers plan.
Okay, thank you. The next one is about the tooling. Will the tooling only scan and manage containers within Azure for vulnerabilities, or can it also contain containers in our AWS environments?
I think that will be a great question for Future.
Yeah, so we're supporting Azure, AWS, and GCP. So any images that are stored in Azure Container Registries or Elastic Container Registries, Google Artifact Registry, and Google Container Registry.
Thank you. The next question we have is, what will happen if the transition is not completed until deadlines?
So from a service perspective, as of May, we will start to auto-migrate customers, which means that in those customers that are not using Bring Your Own License anywhere in their environment, they will automatically get Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management enabled as their leading vulnerability assessment provider. At that stage, we are not going to remove the Qualys VA extension yet. This is something that might happen later on, but the recommendation is that customers until then already started the migration So it's not going to be a forceful migration from Qualys to MDVM, but that you have the time to basically do it on your own.
From the container side, so if you were to onboard today, you would get access to the vulnerability scanning powered by MDVM. For customers who are still viewing or who still see the recommendations for Qualys, starting March 1st, those recommendations would no longer be available in the portal, and you would only be seeing the results from MDVM.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question we have, will results also get sent to Microsoft Defender portal where workstations report into? So all the details, the question is if all the details are consolidated into a single portal.
So there again, for servers, the answer is yes. We are including both. If we take a look at the agent-based solution, it is exactly the same as what you have with your workstations, because we are using Defender for Endpoint as an agent, and it will report the same findings into the Defender XDR portal. With agentless scanning, you will see the results as well, but there is not going to be that same type of device inventory, because there's no actual onboarded device when using agentless scanning without the Defender for Endpoint agent. But you will see the results in both Defender for Cloud and in the Defender XDR portal.
The results from the container scanning only show in the Defender for Cloud portal.
Okay, there's been more questions trickling in. The next one is the vulnerability evidence function going to be available in the Microsoft Defender portal?
The evidence, meaning the file path, I need to double check on that. I believe it is there already. I'm not entirely sure about it. We would have to check on that and then follow up on it.
Okay. Moving on to the next one. Can you clarify if MDVM for server security covers both Azure servers and on-prem servers?
Yes, that's a great question. So yes, it does, if it is agent-based. So agent-based scanning is available for any server as long as you can deploy Microsoft Defender for Endpoint to it. For multi-cloud VMs, we are also offering the agentless capability, but that is not available for on-prem machines. But in general, yes, MDVM for server security covers both Azure servers, on-prem servers, and also AWS and GCP.
Elias sending us thanks from Chile. Thank you, Elias. And
thank you very much.
Moving on to the next one. Do you scan non-OS disks and the AWS KMS encrypted volumes?
Yes, with agentless scanning, we do. So we do support encrypted disks in AWS, both customer and platform managed keys. And we are scanning operating system and data disks.
Okay, thank you for that. Let me go back. I think I may have missed one here at the top. In Defender for Cloud, the fix vulns, that's the short, I guess, for vulnerabilities in VMs finding. Have you added the ability to exempt specific VMs findings?
You have the capability to either exempt a specific VM from that particular security recommendation, or you have the capability to exempt a particular CVE ID from being shown. There's no capability in Defender for Cloud to exempt a unique CVE ID from a unique server, if that is the question.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, if there's more to add, please let us know. This goes to the audience. If Defender for Endpoint is the agent used to collect MV data, what are the benefits of using the integrated MDVM agent for servers already onboarded to Defender for Endpoint?
So this is more a question regarding the integration between Defender for Endpoint in general with Defender for Cloud. So the main idea is that Defender for Endpoint is a market-leading EDR solution that we decided to integrate, which is one of the reasons why we made the decision back in July last year to going forward only rely on agentless scanning and Microsoft Defender for Endpoint as an agent. The main idea is that with having Defender for Endpoint and Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management as great solutions, we are unifying the visibility in Defender for Cloud when it comes to cloud resources. So Defender for Cloud has that, I would say, resource owner view, while Microsoft Defender XDR portal, the security.microsoft.com, more has a view for the SOC personnel, like security specialists. By unifying these capabilities into two different portals, we give the best of both worlds to the individual persona, depending on what they are interested in seeing. So in Defender for Cloud, they see the whole posture coverage, all the vulnerability assessment findings for all the cloud resources, whereas in Defender XDR, the SOC team can see a broader view on every device, not only related to the cloud, but related to the whole enterprise. So it's basically a different view, but the information that we're showing is pretty much the same. So we're collecting the information from MDVM and we're sharing that information between both portals or both products, if you want to.
Thank you, Tom. The next question is, will the automatic upgrades from Qualys to MDVM also enable Defender for Endpoint on servers? And there's also a follow-up question to that. If we deliberately do not use Defender for Endpoint, do we need to disable the vulnerability scanning configuration in subscriptions before this date to prevent this?
No, we're not going to automatically deploy Defender for Endpoint. The recommendation would be to enable Defender for Endpoint integration as soon as possible, unless you're using a third-party EDR solution. And then we're back to that FAQ that we had earlier. What if I'm not using Defender for Endpoint as an EDR? What can I do then? And the answer is you can use Defender for Servers P2 with agentless scanning, but that would be a decision that you need to make. It's not something that we will automatically enable for you then. Or if it is an on-prem server, there's no way around Defender for Endpoint because that is the agent that we leverage for non-cloud machines.
Thank you, Tom. Lots of questions came in. I see the teams are already responding to some of them, so I'm going to pick one that is not in the works. So moving on to the next one here. How big is the effort to migrate the MDVM? We currently have Defender CSPM.
So in Defender CSPM, you already are using Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management with its agentless capabilities. Defender CSPM is that, I would call it the hero SKU for posture management, if you want to. So it brings together everything that is related to cloud security posture management. And when we created that plan, we made the decision that we do not want customers to be forced to use an agent. So this is why Defender CSPM is using all the capabilities based on an agentless basis, including for containers, for servers, and so on. So with that, you are using agentless scanning already. Now, if you are using Defender for Servers in addition, in this particular case, Defender for Servers Plan 2, and you would be using Qualys, the agentless scanning would already be available, but you won't see the results because the agent-based capability takes precedence over the agentless scanning. Now, the effort would be in this scenario, if you're just using Defender CSPM, there is no effort because you are already using Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management. If you're using Defender CSPM together with Defender for Servers Plan 2, then the effort is that you need to migrate your subscriptions to Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, which is the PowerShell command or the REST API call I demoed earlier before. And then you would have to remove the Qualys VA extension.
Okay, thank you for that. Now going back to something that you may have already elaborated, but there's still a question. So it goes like this. If we have to enable endpoint vulnerability management scanning to monitor vulnerability assessment, then why we need to monitor from two consoles, from MDC, and MDE?
You don't have to use two consoles. You will be able to use them. So we do have Microsoft Defender for Cloud that will show the vulnerability assessment findings as security recommendations and based in Azure Resource Graph, and you can export the information to Log Analytics if you wish to. Or you can use security.microsoft.com as the Microsoft XDR portal that also will contain the same information because that is where Defender Vulnerability Management actually resides. But you're not forced to use both portals. I have a lot of customers where the cloud team, for example, is using Defender for Cloud only, and the SOC team is using the Defender XDR portal only. So there is no overlap in these teams then. It really depends on how you are working, but we just give you those two options. You don't have to use both of them.
Thank you, Tom. Next question is, how can we get the information when a vulnerability has been first or last seen on a device?
This information should be available in Defender XDR portal. We do not show it in Defender for Cloud, at least not in an easy way. You could be able to retrieve it via Azure Resource Graph. But in security.microsoft.com, if you go to the individual machine and the findings for this machine, you will see when a vulnerability has been detected there.
Okay, thank you. And let me see here. Okay, so can we integrate Defender with a SIEM like Wazoo server for testing?
In general, we do have several capabilities. So there are third-party SIEM solutions that will have a connector. But in general, what you can do is you can export all the information in Defender for Cloud, which means security alerts, security recommendations, sub-assessment findings, which include vulnerability assessment findings, into an event hub. And you would basically just subscribe on that event hub with that SIEM solution and then get it like in a FIFO pipeline. You will then get all the results that we are exporting, and we're exporting them in near real time. So as soon as an alert shows up or as soon as a new vulnerability finding is there, it will be exported to the event hub. And then the subscriber will take the information from the event hub and store it in the third-party SIEM solution. So this should be possible.
Well, thank you so much, Tom, as well as Future. This concludes pretty much all of our questions, and I think all of them were answered either verbally or through text. So thank you for being our guest and for sharing this great information with our community. Also would like to thank our SMEs here in the background who helped us with answering the questions and providing the resourceful information. Yeah, good point. I see Future saying a lot of people stay through Q&A, so thank you for staying with us through to the end. So to all the listeners out there still on the line, if you're someone who wishes to aid us in protection of the world from cyber threats and desires to have a say in shaping our strategies, blueprints, and recommendations, then we invite you to become part of our security community. Because together we believe that we can make a global impact. So join us at aka.ms/security community. This is also where you'll be notified about our upcoming webinars, such as the one we had today, events, and other announcements. And also, please take a minute to submitting your webinar feedback at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. And for those of you who may have additional questions on the topic we just covered or other product related questions or feedback, please feel free to raise them on our Microsoft Tech community discussion space at aka.ms/MDC community. Thank you all for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.